Claire Cannon from the Good Reading Guide. Today I have a slightly unusual topic to discuss. Don't judge a book by its cover. Everybody does it, but sometimes it really doesn't help to judge a book by its cover. Here are a few random examples of why. Skulduggery Pleasant by Derek Landy. Many parents and teachers have shown concern about what these books could possibly contain. I'll admit it's not Shakespeare, but it is an original and funny story that does have a clear good and evil distinction. The skeleton really is the good guy. Fablehaven by Brandon Mull. This one looks rather dark and sinister, but it's standard kids' fantasy. Yes, there is magic, but again it's clear about good and evil, and the fantasy elements are used as a tool to help visualise the moral content. For example, at one point a boy does something wrong, and he is half turned into a walrus. His wrongdoing has a very obvious bad effect, something that can be harder, though not impossible, to show in realistic fiction. Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. I love this cover, but it does tend to draw a younger reader than this book is good for. It's about a 16-year-old girl who's not afraid to completely disregard the opinion that others have of her. Her independence is an admirable quality that can help older readers a lot, but I often find that the younger readers think she's too unusual. Yet the cover attracts the younger readers, and the older readers think this book looks a little childish. I just have to reassure them that it's definitely worth reading. Crown Jewel and The Stranger to Command by Sherwood Smith. These two books, one a prequel to the other, look quite gritty and not terribly attractive, yet these are two books that I highly recommend to almost every reader. I really think they could be bestsellers if they had a nice fresh cover. The main characters don't come across anything like this in the story. Crown Jewel is wonderful for girls 13 and up who can handle a complex but very rewarding story. A Stranger to Command, the prequel, which can also be read alone, is for boys 13 to 15 and girls 13 and up. It's a brilliant story about a young man who learns to be a great leader, and it's a highly enjoyable read. The Apothecary's Daughter by Julie Klassen. This book has such a sweet cover which really doesn't reflect the depth in the heroine's character. The story reminded me of Jane Eyre, and I don't think this cover would do justice to Jane Eyre. The story does have a little sweetness, but overall it's the wrong impression to give for a very worthwhile story. Healing the Culture by Robert Spitzer. This non-fiction title looks like a solid reference text, but I think it could be a bestseller with a more upbeat cover. It explains nothing less than human happiness and how we find it, something that everyone is interested in. It's philosophical, but explained in practical terms and is very accessible when read calmly. It doesn't work to skim through it. Knowing the content of this book makes happiness so much more attainable. We understand why quick pleasure doesn't ultimately satisfy, and why brief suffering can be compatible with a deeper joy. It's a great book for everyone. And finally, Called to Life by Jacques Philippe. This one sits in the spiritual section and looks quite vague, but it's another book that could be read by everybody. It's short and can be reread many times in order to get something different from it every time. I've read it more than 10 times myself, and I'm probably due for a reread soon. It's about how every person, whether they're religious or not, faces a particular set of circumstances each day that they can either respond to generously or turn away from and try to avoid out of comfort, giving into a kind of selfishness. But it explains that our fears are often exaggerated, and that if we learn to face things generously, the initial fear of coming out of our comfort zone is replaced by deep peace and happiness. This is so relevant for everyone. Perhaps an abstract cover may work better than this vaguely spiritual one. Remember, you can always read our reviews on the Good Reading Guide to discover the content behind the cover.